What up? We're doing a review of Ruxt. Ruxt v 0.1.2 has released and it's actually sort of usable now. So we're gonna go over how to use it real quick. The first thing you need to know is that there is now a CLI tool you can use called create-ruxt-app, which just kind of writes all the boilerplate that you need to get an app up and running with it. So you can install that using cargo install create-ruxt-app like this. I think it won't let me, because I already have it on the system. But yeah, create-ruxt-app. There will be a link below for that stuff, or anything I talk about in this video. So next up, we're gonna actually create our app. So in order to run that, I'm gonna do create-ruxt-app, and then I need to give it a name. In this case, I'm gonna go To-Do. We're doing the coolest To-Do app that you've ever seen. It's gonna cover a few different things like routing, dynamic routes, and serving files. So To-Do, I'm gonna click enter. It's created the application. So here in the folder, you'll see here, got a very basic setup. In the future, the framework's going to have a rendering system or a macro to handle rendering or something. But for right now, that's not built in. It's basically just a router. So I'm using Tera as the default because it's what I've used and I like working with it. But you can feel free to use other rendering and or templating solutions as you please. So reviewing the code here really quick, you see we have, we're importing some stuff from Actix Web. Ruxt is built on top of Actix Web, so we're using some of their stuff here. We're declaring our module pages, which is where all of our routes live. And then rather than labeling our main function with Actix Web main, we're labeling it with Ruxt main, which is like the main thing that the crate provides right now. So in here we create our Tera instance, and we're actually using Actix Web to provide it as app data to each of our routes. I'm just showing you can send data between routes. This is the way that you pass stuff. Like if you were gonna have a database pool or something, you would do a similar thing here in the main function and you could pass it to each of your routes. This is all Actix Web stuff, nothing specific to Ruxt yet. All right, now to talk about the pages module. This folder is where you define all of your routes in your Ruxt application. So we're going to create a couple of example routes, and I actually have first a piece of code that I would like to include here. So first, I'm going to create a models folder, and here I'm just going to paste this stuff in. You don't need to know too much about this, in all honesty. Like, these are fairly simple actions. I'm basically just creating and writing to a file that I called todo.txt. Yeah, not super important. I do have a function down here called render, which takes in a Tera instance and then a mutable Tera context, and it will insert the to-dos. So this was just a helper thing because I was doing it a bunch. Real quick, I'm also going to include my template file. This is something I cooked up before. Again, the contents of this don't really matter. You'll notice up here that I do have HTMX installed, and then down here we're doing some stuff with our HX attributes, and then one more again. So this is another HTML file called todos.html, which I've prepared, and this guy basically renders each individual to-do. You have the ability to delete with a button. I didn't actually store a checkbox, which is integral to a to-do app, but I didn't want to redo it, so here we are. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a couple of different pages. First, we have to-do as a get, and we have to-do as a post. So in order to create these routes, we have to first create our todo.rs file and make sure to include it in the module. Then here, in order to create routes at different HTTP verbs, we're going to create functions with the names of those verbs. So for example, and I'm going to import some Actix Web stuff here. If I want to create a get endpoint at the to-do route, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pub async function called get. We're going to have Tera. In this case, that actually might be everything we need. And then I'm going to return a result of impl responder or Actix Web error. cool. So this has now created a GET request at the /to-do route. What I'm going to do is we're going to use the models to-do manager. Again, this is our struct that I'm using to manage our to-dos. And we are going to first, I'm going to need a mutable context, which equals a Tera context new, and we are going to say let to-do manager equals a to-do manager new. Now I actually was going to pass this around like I am the Tera context, but because we're borrowing it as mutable, in some places it was going to be a much bigger thing for this example, so I decided not to include it. And then in this case, this init function actually returns all of the to-dos right out of the file. And so the next step here, as I pointed out before, we have a function on the to-do manager struct where I can render this stuff. Now I do happen to know that this returns a result of type string or string. So actually, for convenience, I like to do this rather than do matches all over the place in my routes that return a result. I will map the error and then return the value of that map. So in this case, if there is an issue, I like to print like error rendering to do with the error that we received, and then I will return an Actix Web error, error internal server error. And so in this case, I'm just gonna go E. I think that that's all I need to do there. Yeah. So then down here at the bottom, we're just returning the rendered, what was rendered up here. Let's go ahead and give that a test. But if we go to 127, you'll see here we've got our super cool to-do app. You see, I've got some images. We're going to add those in just a second. But we've got no to-dos yet. Since we have our GET request working, I'm going to add a post request. So again, just copying here, I'm going to grab my Tera instance, and again, I'll just grab the result block that we've got here. So again, technically this is all we have to do in order to create a post request. Lots of similar stuff going on here. If I was going to make a real app, maybe this would look a little bit more complicated or be a little bit cleaner, but we're putting together the to-do app. So now the other thing here is that this post request is going to need a form body. Now forms are something you're going to work with a lot in HTMX, so I am going to create a new struct. Now I happen to know, if we look here in the index file, that this input is called to do. So that's what's going to come through on the form body. So I'm going to go create to do as the name of the struct, and then it's going to have a to do with a type of string. So here in our route handler, I am going to add on a form, which is of type web form, a create to do. So that should be everything that we need to do to actually gain access to that information. So now I'm going to have to-do manager dot add. Again, the details of the to-do manager kind of don't matter. I'm lazy, and so I'm just kind of cloning stuff. We're making examples, people. So this has now added the to-do to our file, and now I am going to, the same deals up here actually, I'm just going to copy the code that we wrote up here, because we can now render out our to-dos and return the value. And so here, I'm going to use cargo watch. I'll have a link for that below as well. But we have a issue. We actually need to use Saturday on this bad boy. We're going to do that. That should solve that issue. Yep, we're looking good. So going back over to our Chrome instance, you'll see here no to-dos yet. But if I type in test maybe, boom, we have our test. And we can add to it just fine. Duncan's cool app. Boom. Now the problem is we want to be able to delete these things. So this is where we get a little bit more specific than just this general to-do route. So in my todos.html file over here, you'll see this button has an hx delete property. So to-do name. Now you see here again, this is a dynamic route. And so in order to handle for that scenario, we actually need to reformat our code. Right now we have our to-do file as just todo.rs. Now that won't work if I want to have a nested file as well. And so here I'm going to create a new folder called to-do. I'm going to create a mod.rs for it. And in this case, I'm going to grab all of this code that we just wrote, and I'm going to put it in an index.rs file. And now we are safe to delete the original to-do app. This shouldn't actually change any of the functionalities that are created here. You see, we're compiling just fine now. If I reload, everything looks good. But if I want to create the name route, get access to the name property, I need to create a underscore, and then whatever the name of the route is. So in this case, it's name. So once again, need to include it in our mod file. So now we're creating a delete endpoint. Now basically the same idea, and in fact I'm going to go grab some of these imports that we have over here because I'm probably going to use all of them. So Actix Web treats paths as structs. So I'm going to create a pub struct, and it's going to be delete to do. And we're going to have a pub name, which is string. This is going to be labeled with deserialize from Serd or Serday or however you say it. And now exactly the same thing as before. I'm going to create a function called delete. And this is going to, once again, I'm just going to copy this code from over here because we don't need to keep rewriting it. I'm going to get Tera, and then in this case I'm actually going to have a path, which is a web path of delete to do. And again, I'm just going to go copy this stuff because I really don't want to keep writing it. So we now have our route here. We're going to grab our context. We're going to grab our to-do manager. Again, if I was writing this for a real production application, I would probably do something about passing this to-do manager around, but I don't right now, and I don't care enough to do it. Now in this case, I'm going to run delete, and then we're going to need the path.name. I'm going to clone it again so that it doesn't yell at me. And then same deal here. I'm going to grab my render function and I'm going to respond with my body. And so that should be all I have to do in order to have that work as we expect. You see I can reload here, click delete, and it removes that to do from the list. Same with test. I can go again, blah, 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 sure. Now I want to show you how to serve files, just plain files, because I want to put some cool decoration on this website. Now to do that, I'm going to utilize a package called Actix Files. And all of this is under the Actix framework, so it all works very nicely together. Now, over here, back in our main function, in this case, I'm going to create a new and see GitHub Copilot basically knows what I want to do right now. It just got its information wrong. So here, basically, we have imported this files struct from Actix Files, and I can instantiate a new service on my app with files new, and then the first parameter here is the endpoint that we want it to end up at. So the /public is where that folder's files will live, and then the route to the folder that we want to expose to the app. So here I'm going to create a folder called public. That should be all good now. I do need to copy from a test that I had been doing earlier before I started this. So here I should have a file called fire.gif. Cool. If we reload this app, you see this is like the sickest to-do app you've ever seen. We got images being served, we got to-dos being added. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basics of creating an application in Rust. It still feels very much like an Actix wrapper, but I do think that this pages directory already makes it feel a lot nicer when building an application like this. Like, you don't always need all of the control. Sometimes it's nice just to be able able to lay some stuff out and get going. So yeah, let me know if there's any specific functionalities you're looking to use. If you do use the framework or play around with it, let me know what you think. If there's any improvements you like, things you don't like. Yeah, I think that's everything. Bye.